Welcome everyone, it's Shari Carroll for SimonsStamp.com, and today I've created a shaker box using the Tim Holtz STAMPtember 2022 exclusive. This is a 6x8 red rubber cling stamp set, and it features a really nice vintage Santa climbing a ladder and going up to the chimney with some trees and also some really beautiful snowflakes. It also has those traditional messages that you can mix and match together. This exclusive also features a 4 3/4 by 4 3/4 snowflake stencil, and this is really great to create soft falling snow. I've used a square Tim Holtz vignette box to create a shaker using layers of those stamped images and also the snowflake on a piece of acetate with some of that snowflake stencil on top and then my message inside. I've also added in a bunch of mica flakes so that this can be shaken and create a little interaction for the holidays. To start this off, I have my stamp on my MISTI and I've put it to the right, and I'm going to be stamping twice. I just want a portion of those trees on the right. So I'll be inking this up with Simon's Stamp Intense Black ink. Then I'll give the stamp a good press through the door to get a great impression. Next, I've moved my stamp down and I'm re-inking it, and I can shut my door now and press this down and get an impression of those trees to the right, just touching over the trees to the left. I'll be deconstructing this image, so I've cut several different panels, and I'll be layering these back up on top of each other once they're colored. On each underlying layer, you're going to want to color just somewhat around the edge so that when the next layer sits on top, it'll have a little bit of color underneath. I've chosen a selection of greens that I thought would look good together as pine trees, and I'll start coloring in the trees. I will have these listed in the description box below, so if you like these colors, you can find them. So I'm basically coloring in the areas where there is shading on the stamp image, and I'm leaving area to where I can add some white snow later. And I'm using Copic marker so that I don't have any bleed through once I put paste on top. At this point, I have 3 of my panels colored, and I can stack these on top of each other, and I have some foam tape in between there. So there's a nice amount of depth and dimension. And I'm going to be cutting this last piece out just at the tree line so that I can put a black piece behind with a snowflake. I'm using the Simon's Stamp foam squares, and I've cut some of those up a little bit for some of those tree branches to make them smaller. And now I'll just place the image of the tree right on top of the other tree. And this next part was completely experimental, but it really worked out well. So I have translucent grit paste and one of the fine needle bottles. And I'm going to add in some of this grit paste. I'm just going to put it into the lid. And at this point, I wasn't sure how it was going to work. And I realized when I screw the bottle lid back on top, it might kind of all ooze out. And once the lid's full, I can add a little bit more inside the bottle. I'm not sure how much I need to use to complete my trees. I was pleasantly surprised when I put the lid on and I started to screw it down, and I didn't have any ooze out from the sides. So the next thing I need to do is to clip off the tip of this bottle so that I can get a really nice fine tip. And I'm going to start squeezing this onto those white areas of the tree, and I'm just using some dots to try to create clumps of snow. This turned out so well, and I'm excited that I found a new technique, and it looks pretty realistic once it's on the tree. Now that my trees are dry, I'm going to dry fit this onto a card panel of black, and I'm going to stamp this snowflake using some Simon's Stamp clear ink. I've used my anti-static bag, and I'm using some white embossing powder, and then I'll use my heat gun to melt this to a shiny finish. On a separate panel of black cardstock, I'm stamping the Believe in the Magic, also using the white embossing powder and heat setting that until it's all melted. Next, I want to glue down this panel, and I'm using Simon's Stamp Craft Tacky Glue, and I've used it all over the back, and I want to make sure that I get those corners in really well. And I have cut this down to 5 1/4 by 5 1/4, and it fits just perfect inside the box. If you need to, you can use a credit card or a bone folder and make sure that you have everything pressed down, especially in those corners. I've put all my layers together, and I've used a Simon's Stamp roll of foam tape, and I'm going to take off the back. This is really great tape if you want to use it for some larger areas, and you can also cut it with your scissors for some of those smaller areas. So once I have all the adhesive taken off the back, I'm going to fit this into the box really carefully and make sure I have that bottom edge all the way down to the bottom. And I'm going to remove some of the backing from those smaller trees at the top since I didn't do them before. Now I'm adding the top 2 layers, and I want to make sure that these match up to the image that they're going to sit on top of. And I'm sorry I have my head in the way. But once I have that in place, I can go ahead and press everything down and I have my nice layers. So next I have cut a piece of acetate to 5.5 by 5.5, and this is the Simon's Stamp acetate. I'm also using the Simon's Stamp very, very low tack tape to tape the stencil down in place. And it's also masking off a border around that acetate since it will be a little bit smaller than what I need for the project. So I'm just centering that stencil onto the acetate and then creating that nice masking border. And I'm going right to the edge of that stencil to where there's all white space. And for this, I'm using the translucent Tim Holtz Grit Paste. And since it's translucent, it'll have a little bit of a white finish to it, but not as much as an opaque white paste. So I want to make sure that everything's clean and I'm well protected on those borders so that this will be a nice, easy cleanup. And next I'll separate the stencil along with the tape as much as I can, and you can see how that paste is onto that acetate and it looks fabulous. Before I seal everything up, I'm using the Simon's Stamp Craft Tacky Glue, and I'm going to add just a little bit along the bottom area across the entire piece. And now I'm pouring in some of those mica flakes. I want to make sure that I have a good amount so that this can be a shaker box. And I'm just going to go in with my thumb and I'm going to press some of those mica flakes into that wet glue so that area will always remain covered. Next, I'm going to get ready to add my acetate, and I've used some of the Simon's Stamp 1/8 inch red tape since it's a super strong hold, and I know that it'll hold on to that wood and also the acetate at the same time. So I'm going to carefully align this, and I'll just do one side at a time. So once I have that side glued down, I can remove the next, and I'll just pull that up and then seal that off with my finger. And then I'll just move around until I have all 4 sides adhered in place. To finish this project off, I'm using some of the Tim Holtz silver glitter tape, and I am running this right along the outside edge of the wood box, and I'm leaving a little bit of overhang so I can trim this off once I'm done. I want to miter the corners, so I'm lifting up both of those pieces of tape and cutting them at the same time. So here's a look at my finished project with my snowfall on the outside and my Santa on the inside. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial, and remember that the Tim Holtz STAMPtember 2022 stamp and stencil set is limited edition and it will not be restocked. I hope you're enjoying STAMPtember and have a great day.
I'm Heidi, Simon's mama and founder at simonsaysstamp.com. Thank you so much for watching our video. If you like what you just saw, be sure to press the thumbs up and subscribe to see more great content.